My name is Hannah Bennett. I'm 29 years old. 14 years ago, on a freezing November night, my mother looked me in the eyes and said something I will never forget. "You're not my daughter anymore. Get out before I call the police." I was 15 years old. I had no shoes on. The temperature outside was 34 degrees. And the reason she said those words? My little sister had whispered a lie into her ear. A lie so calculated, so precisely crafted, that my parents never once questioned it. Just like that, I stopped existing. 4 hours later, a hospital called them. I had been hit by a truck on Highway 9. When my father walked into that emergency room and saw the woman sitting beside my bed, his face went completely white. He stopped breathing for a moment. Because the woman holding my hand wasn't a nurse. She wasn't a doctor. She was Dr. Margaret Whitfield, the founder of the largest education foundation in the state. The woman whose face appeared in every newspaper that year. And she had just saved my life. That night rewrote everything. Last month, I stood on a podium at my sister's wedding rehearsal dinner. I wasn't invited. My parents thought I was dead. Before I tell you what I said when I stepped into that room and what my sister did when she recognized me, please take a second to hit that subscribe button and leave a comment telling me what country you're watching from. It truly helps this channel survive. Now, let me take you back to the beginning. Back to the house where I learned that love has conditions. I was 7 years old the first time I understood that my family operated on a different economy of affection. My sister Chloe was 4. We were drawing pictures at the kitchen table for Father's Day. I spent 2 hours on mine. I drew our whole family holding hands in front of a rainbow. I even mixed paints to get the exact color of Dad's brown eyes. Chloe scribbled something that looked like an angry blue octopus and called it done in 4 minutes. When Dad came home, he put my drawing on the counter and said, "Very nice." Then he picked up Chloe's drawing, held it up to the light, and actually gasped. He framed it. He hung it in his office. It stayed there for the next 11 years. My rainbow went in the recycling bin that same evening. That became the blueprint. Chloe's tears carried weight. My achievements evaporated. I brought home a spelling bee trophy at age 9 and my mother handed it back to me and said, "Don't show this to your sister. It'll make her feel bad." I won a county-wide essay contest at 11 and my father forgot to attend the ceremony because Chloe had a minor dentist appointment at the same hour. I learned to celebrate alone, in my bedroom, with the door closed, whispering congratulations to myself in the mirror. By the time I was 13, I had stopped telling them anything. Report cards went straight into my backpack. Acceptance letters stayed unopened. I was selected for a junior national debate team, and I didn't even mention it because I knew what would happen. Chloe would cry. Mom would sigh. Dad would remind me that family comes first and we can't all be in the spotlight. So I just became invisible. It was safer there. But Chloe wasn't satisfied with being the favorite. Something inside her needed more. She needed me to be punished for existing at all. When I was 14, my grandmother passed away and left me her silver locket. It was the only thing in the world that felt like mine. 3 days after the funeral, I couldn't find it. I searched for weeks. I cried into my pillow every night. Then 6 months later, I saw Chloe wearing it at a birthday party. When I confronted her, she looked my mother dead in the eyes and said, "Hannah gave it to me because she said she hated Grandma." My mother slapped me across the face for the first time in my life. That was the moment I realized my sister wasn't just jealous. She was something else. Something I didn't have a word for yet. She could construct lies with the confidence of someone reciting the alphabet. She could cry on command. She could bruise herself on purpose and blame the bruise on me, and my parents. My parents wanted to believe her. Because the version of reality Chloe offered was simpler. In her reality, she was the innocent little angel, and I was the jealous older sister. There was no complication, no guilt, no self-examination required. By 15, I was a ghost in that house. I ate dinner in my room. I walked to school alone. I had exactly one friend, a girl named Priya, who lived 3 blocks away and whose family treated me like a human being for 2 hours a day. I counted the days until college. I made spreadsheets of universities far away. I told myself, 3 more years, just 3 more years, and I'm free. I was wrong. The breaking point came that November, and it came dressed in my sister's sweetest smile. There was a boy at my school named Ethan Parker. He played violin in the orchestra, and he was the kind of quiet that other quiet people recognize. We sat next to each other in AP Literature. One afternoon, he asked if I'd help him understand a Faulkner essay. We met in the library. We stayed there for 2 hours. We didn't flirt. We didn't touch. We talked about books. When I walked out, Chloe was standing at the end of the hallway. She had been watching the whole time through the glass door. She was smiling, but her eyes were not smiling. I felt a chill move through my body that I couldn't explain. That night, when I passed her in the hallway, she whispered something to me. Just 7 words. She said, "You're going to regret that, big sister." And then she walked into her bedroom and closed the door. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't know what was coming. But somehow, somewhere in my bones, I knew the storm had already started. 3 days later, the lie she built was ready, and my entire world would burn to the ground in less than 20 minutes. It was a Thursday night. I remember because I had a chemistry quiz the next morning, and I was upstairs in my bedroom reviewing flashcards when I heard the scream. It came from downstairs. Loud, raw, the kind of scream that makes your stomach drop before your brain catches up. Chloe's scream. I dropped my notebook and ran. When I reached the bottom of the stairs, I froze. My mother was on the kitchen floor cradling Chloe in her arms. Chloe's face was buried in her shoulder, and she was sobbing so hard her whole body was shaking. My father stood in the doorway, his jaw locked, his fists clenched. And when he turned and saw me, I swear the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "Hannah," he said. His voice was low, controlled. The voice he used when he was too angry to yell. "Come here. Now." I walked closer, my legs shaking. I didn't know what I had done. I genuinely didn't know. Chloe lifted her face out of my mother's shoulder. Her cheek was red. There was a thin scratch across her collarbone. Her lip was swollen. She looked broken. She looked like a victim. And then she looked at me, and for a fraction of a second, less than the blink of an eye, I saw her smile. It was so small that I thought I imagined it. But I didn't. I know I didn't. "Tell us what happened, sweetheart," my mother whispered, stroking Chloe's hair. "Tell us what Hannah did." Chloe started crying again. I didn't want to say anything. I didn't want her to get in trouble. She looked up at my father with those perfect tears. She hit me. She's been hitting me for weeks. She said if I told you, she'd do worse. She said she wished I was never born. My ears started ringing. I couldn't feel my hands. I tried to speak, but nothing came out. My mother stood up slowly, her face transforming from soft sympathy into something I had never seen before. Pure, white-hot hatred, directed at me. "Mom, that's not true." My voice was a whisper. "I have never touched her. I swear on Grandma's grave I have never—" "Don't you dare bring up your grandmother." My mother's voice cracked like a whip. "Don't you dare." My father stepped closer to me. "Is this why she's been so scared lately? Is this why she won't sleep with her door unlocked? Because of you?" "No. Dad, please listen to me. She's lying. Look at me. I would never hurt her. I don't even raise my voice at her." Chloe reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. She handed it to my mother with shaking hands. "She sent me these too. She's been sending them for months." My mother scrolled through the screen, her face drained of color. She turned the phone toward me and my stomach dropped. There were dozens of messages. My profile picture, my username, horrible messages, threats, things like, "You're adopted and nobody wanted you," and "I wish mom had an abortion." Messages I had never written in my life. I didn't send those. Chloe hacked my account. She knows my password. She stole my phone last week and I thought I lost it. Stop lying. Yeesh. My father's voice exploded through the kitchen. Just stop. I cannot listen to another word out of your mouth. Please, Dad, check the timestamps. Check my phone records. She took my phone on Tuesday. I was at Priya's house. I have witnesses. Hannah. My mother's voice went quiet. Deadly quiet. Take off your shoes. What? I said, take off your shoes. I didn't understand, but I obeyed. She walked to me, grabbed my wrist so hard I felt a bone pop, and dragged me to the front door. She opened it. The wind hit my face like a wall. It was November. The rain was freezing. The porch light flickered. Mom, please. What are you doing? I want you out of my house. Right now. Mom, it's raining. It's freezing. I don't have shoes. I don't have a jacket. Please, just let me explain. I have wanted to believe you were just difficult. Her voice was trembling now, not with sadness, but with rage. I have wanted to believe my daughter wasn't capable of hurting her baby sister, but now I know. You're not my daughter. You're something else. Something broken. And I will not have you poisoning this family for one more night. Get out. Richard. I turned to my father, desperate, begging. Dad, please. Please don't let her do this. I didn't do anything. I swear to you, I didn't do anything. My father wouldn't look at me. He stared at the kitchen floor. He said 7 words that I have never forgotten. You heard your mother. Get out, Hannah. I stepped backward through the doorway. My bare feet touched the cold concrete of the porch. The rain hit my shoulders. I looked up one last time, and I saw Chloe standing behind my parents, watching me. And this time, she wasn't even pretending to cry anymore. She was just smiling. A quiet, satisfied smile. The smile of someone who had just won a game she had been playing for 11 years. And then, my mother slammed the door. I heard the lock turn. I heard the deadbolt slide. I stood on that porch for probably 5 minutes in shock. My brain couldn't process what had just happened. I knocked on the door. Nobody answered. I rang the doorbell. Nobody came. I pressed my face against the window and I saw my father sit down at the kitchen table with his head in his hands. I saw my mother still holding Chloe, whispering to her, rocking her like a baby. Nobody even glanced at the window. I was invisible to them. I had been erased in under 20 minutes. I started walking. I had no phone. It was upstairs on my bed. I had no shoes. I had no jacket. I had no idea where to go. Priya's family was out of town for Thanksgiving week. My grandmother was dead. I had no other relatives in this state. I just walked. The rain turned into sleet. My feet went numb after the first 10 minutes. I couldn't feel my fingers. I tried to stay on the grass because the pavement was too cold, but the grass was muddy and slippery. I fell twice. The second time, I just sat there for a minute, in the mud, in the dark, in the freezing rain, and I thought about giving up. Not just walking. I mean, actually giving up. I thought about how easy it would be to just stop trying, to just lie down and wait. I thought, my own mother doesn't want me. What's the point of any of this? But then something inside me pushed back. A voice I didn't recognize. It said, if you die tonight, Chloe wins forever. If you die tonight, she'll wear your death like a trophy for the rest of her life. Get up. So I got up. I kept walking. I walked toward the highway. I don't know why. Maybe because there were lights. Maybe because there were people. I just needed to see another human being who wasn't my family. The wind got stronger. My teeth were chattering so hard I thought they would crack. I reached Highway 9 around 11:30 p.m. I stepped onto the shoulder, thinking I could flag down a car. And that's when I heard the truck. The horn came first, then the headlights, then the sound of tires skidding on wet asphalt. I remember flying through the air. I remember thinking, so this is how it ends. And then darkness. I don't remember the impact. I don't remember hitting the ground. The next thing I remember is a woman's voice. Warm, urgent, shaking with emotion. Someone was holding my hand. Someone was saying, "Stay with me, sweetheart. Stay with me. Help is coming. I am not letting you go. Do you hear me? I am not letting you go." I tried to open my eyes. I managed to see her face for just a second before I blacked out again. Dark hair pulled back, wire-rimmed glasses, a blue wool coat. And she was crying. A complete stranger was crying over me. The first person in 4 years who seemed to actually care whether I lived or died. And I had no idea that this woman was about to become the most important person in my entire life. I woke up 3 days later. The first thing I felt was pain. Every part of my body hurt. My left leg was in a cast. My ribs were wrapped. There was a breathing tube taped to my face. I tried to open my eyes and the light was too bright. I heard a soft voice say, "She's waking up." Oh, thank God. She's waking up. I turned my head, and there she was. The woman in the blue coat. Except she wasn't wearing a coat anymore. She was wearing a cream-colored sweater and she was sitting in a plastic hospital chair that she had clearly been sleeping in for days. Her hair was messy, her glasses were smudged, and her eyes were red. "Hi, sweetheart." She reached out and squeezed my hand. "My name is Margaret. You had a very bad accident. But you're going to be okay. Do you understand me? You are going to be okay." I tried to speak, but my throat was too raw. She gently brought a cup of ice chips to my lips. I whispered one word. "Family." Her face changed. Her jaw tightened. She looked toward the door and then back at me. "Hannah, your parents came here. They came on the first day. I need to tell you what happened. But only when you're ready. Do you want to know now, or do you want to rest first?" I closed my eyes. Tears started sliding down my face before I could stop them. "Tell me." She took a breath. "They signed papers, Hannah. Your mother signed papers renouncing custody. Your father signed papers too. They told the hospital that you were a runaway. They told the social worker that you had mental health problems and you were dangerous to your sister. They asked that you be placed in state foster care as soon as you were medically stable. And then they left. They didn't leave a phone number. They didn't leave an address. They didn't ask any questions about your injuries. They were here for 47 minutes. I didn't cry. I had no tears left. I just stared at the ceiling tiles and counted them. 47 tiles above my bed. 1 tile for every minute they spent here before abandoning me forever. Margaret squeezed my hand tighter. "But listen to me. Hannah, listen. I need you to hear what I'm about to say." She leaned closer. "I was the person who hit you with my car. I was driving home from a faculty dinner. I was going the speed limit. You stepped into the road. The police have already cleared me of any wrongdoing. But I have not been able to leave this hospital. I have not been able to eat. I have not been able to sleep. Because I almost killed a child. A child who is out in a storm alone, with no shoes. And I need you to know something. If you have nowhere to go, you have somewhere to go. With me. I am not the same kind of stranger I was 3 nights ago. I am a person who is responsible for your life now. And I intend to take that seriously." I couldn't speak. I just squeezed her hand back. That was our first promise to each other. Later that afternoon, a social worker came in with a clipboard. She introduced herself as Mrs. Coleman, and she had the tired eyes of someone who had seen too many broken children. She sat by my bed and explained my options: foster care placement, group home if no foster family was available, the possibility of a hearing to challenge my parents' custody renunciation, though that was rare and complicated. And then she paused and said, "There is one other option. Dr. Whitfield has filed an emergency request to be considered as your temporary guardian. She has no criminal record. She has no children. She is a professor of education policy and she runs a youth foundation. The court will consider it, but it's unusual. Do you know her?" I looked across the room at Margaret. She was pretending not to listen, but I could see her hands trembling in her lap. "Yes," I whispered. "I know her. I want her. I want to go with her." The paperwork took 6 weeks. I stayed in the hospital for 10 days and then in a transitional home for the rest of it. Margaret came every single day. She brought me books. She brought me journals. She brought me soup that she made herself, even though she was not a good cook, and we both laughed about it. She asked me questions about what I liked, what I hated, what I was afraid of. Nobody had asked me those questions in years, maybe ever. On the day the judge approved the guardianship, Margaret picked me up from the transitional home in her car. She was wearing the same blue coat from the night of the accident. She opened the passenger door for me and she said, "Welcome home, Hannah. Everything you're about to see is yours too. You don't have to earn it. You don't have to ask permission. You belong here." I started crying so hard she had to pull the car over. Margaret's house was not a mansion. It was a small blue colonial in a quiet neighborhood. 3 bedrooms, a vegetable garden in the back, a cat named Einstein who slept on the stairs. But it was the first place in 15 years where I didn't have to brace myself when I walked through the door. The first place where silence was just silence, not a punishment. Margaret gave me the upstairs bedroom with the bay window. She let me paint it any color I wanted. I chose pale green because my grandmother had a pale green teacup that I used to drink from when I was little. Margaret didn't ask why. She just drove me to the paint store and we did it together. I transferred to a new school. I legally changed my last name from Bennett to Whitfield within a year, once Margaret formally adopted me. I had to sit in front of a judge and answer a question. The judge asked me, "Is there anything you want to say to your biological parents through the court record?" I thought about it for a long time, and then I said, "I want them to know that I am not the daughter they threw away. I am the daughter Margaret Whitfield built from scratch, and they will never meet her." The judge actually smiled. The next 3 years were the hardest work of my life. I had to unlearn every survival mechanism I had built since I was 7. I had to learn that when someone asked me how my day was, they actually wanted to know. I had to learn that when I got a good grade, I was allowed to be proud. I had to learn that crying was not manipulation. I had to learn that love didn't come with conditions. Margaret was patient in a way I didn't know was possible. When I had nightmares, she sat on the edge of my bed and read out loud until I fell asleep. When I panicked during a thunderstorm in my 2nd month with her, she held me on the couch until morning. She never once told me to toughen up. She never once said, "Other kids have it worse." She just let me fall apart as many times as I needed to, and she put me back together every time. By the time I was 18, I had a full academic scholarship to a top university. Margaret cried at my high school graduation the way mothers cry in movies. Loudly, unapologetically, with tissues in both hands. She took 100 photos. She made me pose with every single teacher. Afterward, we went out for pancakes because pancakes had become our thing. And over a stack of blueberry pancakes, she slid a small velvet box across the table. Inside was a silver locket. Not my grandmother's locket, a new one. "I know it's not the same," she said quietly. But I wanted you to have something that's just yours, something no one can take. I opened the locket. Inside was a photo of the two of us on the day the adoption was finalized. I wore that locket every single day for the next 11 years. I'm wearing it right now, as I tell you this story. But the thing about surviving is that surviving isn't enough. Not for me. Not after what they did. Because as Margaret taught me how to live, I was also quietly building something else. A plan. Not revenge. Something much bigger than revenge. And by the time I turned 23, the plan was ready to be set into motion. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have predicted, was that Margaret would not live to see how it ended, and that her death would be the moment everything changed. Before I continue, I need to ask you something. Have you ever been in a situation where someone you trusted completely was taken from you right before the most important moment of your life? If you have, drop a heart emoji in the comments. I want to know I'm not alone. And if this story is touching something real in you right now, please hit that subscribe button. It tells YouTube that stories like this deserve to be seen. Now, let me tell you about the years that made me and the day that almost broke me all over again. I majored in public policy with a focus on child welfare law. I minored in clinical psychology. I was not a normal college student. I didn't go to parties. I didn't date. I worked 2 jobs on top of my course load because I refused to let Margaret pay for anything more than my tuition. She already fought that battle with me, and we compromised. I graduated in 3 years instead of 4, summa cum laude, with a senior thesis that was later published in a peer-reviewed journal. The thesis was about adolescent emancipation law and the gap in protection for children abandoned by parents who refused to formally surrender custody. In other words, children like me. Margaret helped me turn that thesis into something real. The summer after I graduated, we sat at her kitchen table with legal pads and cold coffee, and we designed a nonprofit from the ground up. We called it the Blue Coat Initiative. The name was my idea. It was a private joke between us, but it also meant something deeper. The blue coat was the first thing I saw when my life was saved. It was the color of the woman who chose me. I wanted every child in a crisis to have their own blue coat moment. Someone who showed up. Someone who stayed. The initiative had 3 programs: legal advocacy for abandoned minors, emergency housing grants for teenagers rejected by their families, and a scholarship fund for young adults trying to rebuild their education after being displaced from their homes. We started small. In our first year, we helped 9 kids. In the second year, 26. By the 4th year, we had partnerships with 4 state universities, 2 hospital systems, and an interfaith coalition of shelters. I was 26 years old, running a nonprofit with a staff of 12, speaking at conferences, giving interviews on local television. Margaret was always in the audience, always in the front row. She wore a small silver pin on her lapel that said, "Hannah's mom." She had it custom made. She wore it to every single one of my public appearances for 4 years. During those years, I never spoke to my biological family, not once. I knew things about them through the slow bleed of social media. I knew Chloe had gone to a small state college and dropped out after 1 semester. I knew she got engaged at 21 and broke it off within 3 months. I knew my father had a heart attack at 58 and survived. I knew my mother had started a small craft business selling decorative wreaths online. I knew none of them had ever tried to contact me, not through email, not through a letter, not through a mutual acquaintance. They had erased me completely, and they seemed perfectly content with that erasure. Sometimes that hurt more than the night they threw me out. Sometimes it didn't hurt at all. It depended on the day. And then Margaret got sick. It was the spring I turned 27. She came home from a checkup and she sat me down on the couch. She took my hand. She said, "Hannah, I have pancreatic cancer. It is stage 4. The doctors are going to try treatment, but I want you to understand what we are dealing with. I don't remember what I said next. I remember sliding off the couch onto the floor. I remember Margaret coming down with me, holding me against her chest, stroking my hair like she had done the night of the thunderstorm when I was 15. She whispered, "Breathe, my darling, breathe. We are going to face this together, just like everything else." I was 27 years old and I cried like a 7-year-old child, because the first person who had ever truly loved me was about to be taken away. She fought for 11 months. She did chemo. She did radiation. She did an experimental trial at a research hospital 4 hours away. I drove her to every appointment. I slept on hospital recliners so many nights I stopped counting. I watched her lose her hair. I watched her lose 40 pounds. I watched her lose the strength to hold a pen. But she never lost her mind, and she never lost her spirit. 3 weeks before she passed, she asked me to bring her laptop into the hospital room. She wanted to update her will. She wouldn't tell me what she was changing. She just said, "There are some things I need you to not know until the right time." Margaret died on a Tuesday in October, 2 weeks before I was supposed to deliver the keynote address at the Blue Coat Initiative's annual fundraising gala. She died holding my hand. She died in the bedroom of our blue colonial. The last thing she said to me was, "I am so proud of the woman you became. Promise me you will not give them your rage. Promise me you will give them your success instead." I promised her. I promised through tears that would not stop. I promised through a grief so heavy that I thought it would crush me into dust. The funeral was 4 days later. Over 600 people came, former students, colleagues from 3 universities, kids we had helped through the foundation, state legislators, a senator, 3 television crews. I delivered the eulogy. I spoke for 11 minutes without crying, which was the hardest thing I have ever done. I told the story of a 15-year-old girl on a wet highway and a woman in a blue coat who stopped her car and never drove away. I told them that Margaret Whitfield did not just save my life once. She saved it every single day for the next 14 years. I told them that biology is not family. Love is family. Showing up is family. And Margaret had done both, without fail, for longer than most parents manage with their own children. After the service, as people were filing out of the church, Margaret's attorney, a man named Gerald Finch, touched my elbow. He said, "Hannah, I need you to come to my office next week. There are things in her estate that we need to discuss. Things she left specifically for you, and some things she left specifically in your honor. She was very particular about how I should tell you." I nodded. I couldn't process any more information that day. I went home. I sat in her armchair. I wrapped myself in her blue coat, the one she had been wearing the night she saved my life. She had kept it in a protective garment bag in her closet for 14 years. I wrapped it around my shoulders and I sat there until the sun came up. 1 week later, I sat in Gerald Finch's office. He was a careful man. Every word was measured. He opened a leather folder and began. "Margaret left the house to you, free and clear. She left her retirement accounts and her savings to you, but those are the simple parts." He looked at me over his glasses. "Hannah, 3 years ago, Margaret discreetly began purchasing stock in a private education technology company that has since been acquired by a much larger firm. The return on her initial investment has been substantial. She asked me to tell you the number in person so that I could watch your face when you heard it." He paused. "Margaret's net worth at the time of her death was $41 million. She has left all of it to you, with one specific stipulation." I stared at him. I couldn't breathe. "What stipulation?" He slid a sealed envelope across the desk. "She wanted you to open this alone. She wanted you to read it before you made any decisions about the money. She said, and I quote, 'Tell her not to feel obligated to do what I'm asking. Tell her she has earned the right to do whatever she wants, but also tell her that I believe in her more than anyone has ever believed in anyone, and I know she will know what to do." I took the envelope home. I sat on Margaret's bed. I opened it, and what I read inside changed everything. Margaret had already started writing the next chapter of my life before she died, and the name at the center of her final plan was a name she had never said out loud in 14 years. It was my mother's name. The letter was 11 pages long. Margaret had typed it and signed it by hand, and the signature was shaky because her fingers had stopped working properly near the end. I need to pause here for a moment because this is the part of the story where everything I thought I knew about my past turned out to be a lie, layered on top of another lie. If you are watching this right now, please just sit with me for a second. What I am about to tell you is something Margaret spent almost a decade quietly uncovering, and it is the reason my story does not end the way most stories like this end. If you are still with me, type the word listening in the comments. I want to know you're here. Now, let me tell you what was in that letter. Margaret began by apologizing. She wrote, "My darling Hannah, if you are reading this, then I did not get to tell you in person, and I am so sorry for that. I wanted to. I was waiting for the right moment. But I ran out of time, and now you have to hear it from paper instead of from my voice. Please forgive me. I was trying to protect you until you were strong enough to handle it. Now I have to trust that you are." Then she began to explain. 8 years ago, when I was 21 and just starting graduate school, Margaret had hired a private investigator. She had not told me. She had not told anyone. She wanted to know the truth about the night I was thrown out. She wanted to know if there was anything the court had missed. She wanted to know what Chloe had become and whether my parents had ever shown remorse. She said she would have kept the information to herself forever if it had been ordinary information. But it was not ordinary. The first thing the investigator discovered was that Chloe had been in therapy since she was 17. That was not surprising. What was surprising was the reason. Chloe had attempted suicide at 19. She had written a note. The note was entered into the court file during a mandatory psychiatric hold. Margaret had somehow obtained a copy. The note was 3 pages long, and Margaret included a photocopy of it in the envelope. I read it with my hands shaking. In the note, Chloe confessed everything. She wrote that she had fabricated the entire story the night I was thrown out. She wrote that she had sent the threatening messages to herself from a burner account using my profile picture. She wrote that she had scratched herself with a kitchen knife before calling our mother. She wrote that she had done it because she could not stand the way our parents looked at me, even when they thought she was not watching. Because even when I was invisible, she could feel that I was better, smarter, kinder, and she wanted me gone. But the part that broke me was the last page. Chloe had written, "I thought if I got rid of her, Mom would love me like she loves her. But the truth is, Mom never loved Hannah. I was wrong about that. Mom already hated Hannah. I was just the tool she was waiting for." She told me once when I was 12 that Hannah had ruined her life by being born. She said having Hannah was the worst mistake she ever made. I thought if I gave Mom what she wanted, she would love me more. But after Hannah was gone, Mom didn't love me more. She just stopped loving me too. She stopped loving anything. And now, I don't want to be here anymore. I had to put the letter down. I walked to the bathroom. I threw up. I sat on the cold tile floor of my bathroom for probably 45 minutes, just breathing, trying to process what I had just read. My mother had hated me before Chloe was even born. My mother had been waiting for years for an excuse to get rid of me. Chloe was not the villain of this story. Chloe had been a weapon my mother had been sharpening since I was in the womb. I went back to Margaret's bed. I picked up the letter again, and I kept reading. Margaret had also investigated my mother. She had obtained medical records. It took her 2 years and a lot of money, but she obtained them. My mother had been diagnosed with a severe personality disorder when she was 24, 3 years before I was born. She had been prescribed medication. She had stopped taking it during her pregnancy with me and never resumed. She had been flagged by 2 different pediatricians during my early childhood for signs of emotional neglect. Nothing had ever come of those flags because my mother had simply switched doctors each time. The pattern was documented. The cruelty was not random. The cruelty was clinical. My mother had been unfit to raise a child, and nobody had stopped her. Margaret wrote, "Hannah, I need you to understand something, and it is the hardest thing I will ever ask you to understand. Your mother did not choose to hate you in any clean, rational way. Her disorder made her incapable of love for anyone she perceived as a threat or a burden. You were the first child. You were the test. You failed that test the day you started to form your own personality. Your sister was born into a house where the pattern was already set. Chloe learned how to earn crumbs of affection from your mother by becoming exactly what your mother needed: a tool, a servant, a mirror. Chloe is not innocent. She made choices, and those choices nearly killed you. But she is also a casualty. She is a child who was shaped into a weapon by a woman who should never have had children. I am telling you this because I want you to decide what to do with your life, knowing the full truth. Not the truth your mother wants you to know. Not the truth your sister wants you to know. The truth. The letter continued for 3 more pages. Margaret explained what she wanted me to do with the $41 million. She had already laid the groundwork. She had been in discreet contact with the dean of a major private university, a woman named Dr. Lucille Reyes. Together, they had designed a new educational institution, a residential academy for children who had been abandoned, abused, or rejected by their biological families. Not a group home, not an orphanage, a real, accredited, rigorous school with a full residential program, free of charge for every student, that would take children from ages 12 to 18 and give them not just an education, but a family, a community, a future. Margaret had already secured preliminary land and permits. She had put down a deposit. She had drafted the mission statement. All of it was waiting for me. She wrote, "I named it in my draft documents, but you can change the name if you want. I called it the Hannah Bennett Academy. Not Hannah Whitfield, Hannah Bennett. Because I want every child who walks through those doors to know that even the name they were born with can be reclaimed and turned into something glorious." I sat with that letter for 3 full days. I did not eat. I barely slept. I read it over and over until I had memorized every paragraph. And somewhere inside those 3 days, a decision formed. I was going to build the academy. I was going to build it faster and bigger than Margaret had even imagined. I was going to pour every resource she had left me into it. And then I was going to do one more thing, one thing Margaret had not asked me to do, but which I knew she would not forbid. I was going to deliver a letter of my own, not to my father, not to my sister, to my mother, the woman who had engineered my erasure before I had even been born. I spent a month drafting that letter. It was not angry. It was not accusatory. It was simply the truth, laid out in cold, precise language. I told my mother that I knew about her diagnosis. I told her that I knew about Chloe's suicide note. I told her that I knew she had planned my removal from the family for years, and that Chloe had been a knife she had been sharpening in the kitchen drawer since my sister was old enough to manipulate. I told her that I did not want an apology. I did not want an explanation. I did not want a relationship. What I wanted was her presence at a single event, one event, the groundbreaking ceremony of the Hannah Bennett Academy. I told her the date, the time, and the address. I told her that I was sending similar letters to my father and to Chloe, though separately. I told her that their attendance was optional, but I wanted her to know that the woman she had tried to destroy was now building something that would outlive her by a century. And I wanted her to see it. I signed the letter. Your first daughter, the one you forgot, Hannah Whitfield. And then I mailed it. I did not expect a reply. I did not need one. I just wanted her to know. What I didn't know was that all three of them would come, and that on the day of the groundbreaking, the truth would finally break open in front of 200 witnesses, 3 television cameras, and the state's attorney general. The groundbreaking ceremony was scheduled for the first Saturday in May. 14 years, 6 months, and 3 days after the night my mother locked me out of my childhood home. I did not pick that date intentionally. It was the date the weather was most likely to cooperate and the construction crew could begin on time. But the symmetry was not lost on me. The event was held on the 20-acre plot of land where the academy would be built. Margaret and I had picked the plot together 2 years earlier, during one of her good weeks, when she had insisted on driving out to see properties with me, even though she was weak from treatment. We had stood in the middle of an empty field that day, and she had turned to me and said, "This is the one. Can you feel it?" I could. On the morning of the ceremony, I wore a navy suit and Margaret's silver locket. I carried her blue coat over my arm even though it was too warm outside to wear it. I just wanted a piece of her with me. The site had been transformed. White tents, rows of chairs, a small stage, a giant vertical sign that read, "The Hannah Bennett Academy," with the mission statement below it. Television crews from 3 local networks had set up along the back row. Reporters from 2 national education magazines were taking notes. Dr. Lucille Reyes, who had become a close friend since Margaret's death, was coordinating everything with her usual calm efficiency. The state's attorney general was expected. The governor had sent a representative. This was not a small event. This was the birth of something that was going to outlast all of us. I was standing behind the stage with Dr. Reyes when I saw them arrive. My parents walked in together, not touching, keeping at least 2 feet of distance between them. My father had aged drastically. He was fully gray. He walked with a slight limp. He kept looking around like he was trying to decide whether to turn and run. My mother looked almost exactly the same as I remembered her. A little thinner, a little harder around the eyes, but recognizable. She walked straight-backed, chin up, the way she had always walked into rooms where she expected to be judged. And behind them, walking alone, was Chloe. She was 26 years old now. She was wearing a simple gray dress. Her hair was cut short. She was not wearing makeup. She looked so different from the girl I remembered that for a moment I didn't recognize her. She looked tired. She looked breakable. She looked like someone who had been punishing herself for years. A volunteer ushered them to their assigned seats. Not front row, not back row, middle. I had specifically requested that seating arrangement. I wanted them to be able to see me clearly, and I wanted everyone else to be able to see them. Dr. Reyes came over and touched my arm. "Are you still sure about this?" I nodded. "I'm sure. Remember what we talked about. Your voice is the weapon, not your anger. Your voice." I nodded again. I had practiced the speech 52 times. I knew every word. The ceremony began. Dr. Reyes introduced the project. The Attorney General spoke briefly about the importance of institutional support for displaced youth. A former Blue Coat Initiative scholarship recipient, a young man named Marcus, who was now in medical school, gave a beautiful short speech about what Margaret had meant to him. And then it was my turn. I walked up to the microphone. I looked out over the crowd. I saw my mother's face first. Her expression was unreadable. I saw my father beside her, looking at his own hands. I saw Chloe in the middle seat, and she was already crying. Silently. The tears were just rolling down her cheeks without sound. I took a breath. I began. "My name is Hannah Whitfield. 15 years ago, my name was Hannah Bennett. On the night of November 14th, 15 years ago, I was locked out of my childhood home in the freezing rain with no shoes and no coat. I was 15 years old. I walked onto a highway. I was struck by a vehicle driven by a woman named Dr. Margaret Whitfield. Dr. Whitfield did not leave me on that highway. She rode with me to the hospital. She sat beside my bed for 10 days. And when my biological parents signed away their custody rights and walked out of that hospital, Dr. Whitfield did not walk out with them. She stayed. She became my legal guardian. She adopted me. She raised me. She paid for my college. She taught me how to love myself. She taught me that family is not an accident of biology. It is a series of choices. Margaret Whitfield passed away 7 months ago. She did not live to see this day. But this day exists because of her. The crowd was silent, perfectly silent. I could hear my own heartbeat. We stand today on the land where the Hannah Bennett Academy will be built. This will be a residential school for children who have been abandoned, abused, or rejected by the families that were supposed to protect them. Every student will receive a full scholarship. Every student will receive mental health care. Every student will receive legal representation if they need it. Every student will receive a dormitory room that they can decorate any way they want, and a dining hall where they can eat as much as they want, and a library that stays open until midnight, and a staff who will show up for them every single day without fail. Because that is what children deserve, and because that is what I did not have. I looked directly at my mother. Our eyes locked for the first time in 15 years. I want to say something now that I have never said in public. I was not thrown out of my childhood home because I was a difficult teenager. I was thrown out because my mother never wanted me. Her hatred for me predated my ability to speak. My sister was not the architect of that night. My sister was a weapon my mother spent 12 years forging. I do not say this to attack my family. I say it because silence protects abusers, and I will not be silent anymore. Not about what happened to me, not about what happened to my sister, not about any of it. My mother's face had gone from unreadable to something else, something cold. She was shaking her head slowly, barely perceptibly. I continued. 3 months ago, I sent letters to each of my biological family members inviting them to this groundbreaking. I did not invite them for reconciliation. I do not want reconciliation. I invited them because I wanted them to see. I wanted them to see with their own eyes what the daughter they erased has built. I wanted them to see that the girl they called broken was not broken. She was kindling, and kindling becomes fire, and fire becomes light, and light becomes schools, and homes, and futures for children who will now never have to walk through what I walked through alone. The crowd began to applaud, slowly at first, then harder. People were standing. I raised my hand for quiet. I was not finished yet. But I want to say one more thing. I want to say it to one specific person in this audience. I looked directly at Chloe. Her whole body was shaking now. Chloe, stand up. Please. She froze. She looked at me in total disbelief. Please, I said again, more softly. Stand up. I am not going to hurt you. She stood. 200 people turned in their seats to look at her. She was sobbing openly now. I continued. Chloe, I know what you wrote when you were 19. I know what you tried to do. I know why. I want you to hear me say this in front of everyone. You were a child. You were 12 years old when you did what you did to me. You were raised by the same woman I was raised by. And she used you the way she tried to destroy me. I am not absolving you of what you did. You will live with that your whole life, just as I have lived with it. But I am telling you publicly that I see you. I see what was done to you. And there is a spot reserved for you at this academy if you ever want to work here. Not as a student, as a counselor. Because the children who are going to come through these doors deserve to talk to someone who has been on both sides of this kind of wound. Chloe collapsed into her chair and sobbed into her hands. The woman seated next to her, a stranger, a volunteer, put an arm around her shoulders. My mother stood up. She was not crying, she was furious. She started walking toward the stage. Security moved to intercept her. But before they reached her, something happened that I had not planned. My father stood up. My father, who had barely moved the entire ceremony, who had been staring at his shoes, stood up and grabbed my mother's arm. I could not hear what he said, but I saw his face. And for the first time in my life, I saw my father look at my mother with something other than deference. He looked at her with disgust. She tried to pull away from him. He did not let go. And then he did something I will remember until the day I die. He turned to the audience, to the cameras, to the Attorney General, and he said, loud enough for the microphones to pick up, "She is telling the truth. Everything she just said is the truth." And I was a coward. I was a coward for 30 years. And then he let go of my mother's arm, walked past her, walked past Chloe, walked all the way up to the stage, and before I could stop him, he got on his knees. In front of 200 people, in front of 3 television cameras. My father, Richard Bennett, got on his knees and wept. I did not go down to him. I want you to understand that. I did not go to my father when he dropped to his knees, not because I am cruel, but because Margaret had taught me something very important a long time ago. She had taught me that a person who abandons you does not get to choose the moment of your forgiveness. You choose. And in that moment, standing on the stage looking down at my sobbing father, I realized I was not ready. Maybe I would be ready someday. Maybe I would never be ready. Either way, that day belonged to the children who would walk through those academy doors one day. It did not belong to my father's tears. I asked security, very quietly through the microphone, to help my father back to his seat. They did. He did not resist. He was led back to his chair. My mother was nowhere to be seen. She had walked out of the ceremony entirely. I would find out later that she got into a cab and went directly to the airport and flew home. She did not speak to my father again for 6 months. Chloe was still in her seat, still crying, but her body had changed. Her shoulders were lower. Her breathing was slower. Something had broken open in her that had been locked for 15 years. I finished the ceremony. I invited the Attorney General to help me break ground with the ceremonial shovel. I thanked everyone for coming. I introduced Dr. Reyes, who would be the founding headmistress of the academy. I stayed for an hour afterward and shook hands and took photos and answered questions from reporters. I did not cry, not even once, during any of it. I had cried everything I had to cry during the 7 months after Margaret died. I had no tears left for that day. What I had left was a quiet, steady resolve, and I knew Margaret would have been proud. The video from the ceremony went viral within 48 hours. My speech was clipped and shared across every major platform. The moment where my father fell to his knees was played on national morning shows. I received over 12,000 emails in the first week. Most of them were from people sharing their own stories, people who had been thrown out, people who had been abandoned, people who had survived mothers like mine and were not sure what to do with the silence afterward. I could not answer all of them, but I read every single one. I hired 3 additional staff for the Blue Coat Initiative just to help route those emails to appropriate resources. Margaret's death had not ended her work. Her death had multiplied it. 2 weeks after the ceremony, I received a letter from Chloe. Handwritten. 6 pages. It was not a plea. It was not an apology. It was something closer to a confession. She wrote about everything she remembered. Every lie. Every cruelty. Every moment she had chosen to hurt me to secure my mother's approval, only to watch that approval evaporate the next day anyway. She wrote about her suicide attempt at 19. She wrote about the therapist she had been seeing for 7 years. She wrote that she had never told anyone in our family about the therapist because she was afraid they would think she was weak. She wrote that she had read Margaret's obituary when it was published and had cried for 3 days. She did not ask to see me. She did not ask for a phone call. She did not ask for forgiveness. She ended the letter by saying, "If your offer of the counselor position is real, I would like to apply, formally, through the same process every other applicant goes through. I will not expect special treatment. If I am not the right person for the job, I will accept that. But I want you to know that I will spend the rest of my life trying to be someone who would be the right person, whether you ever speak to me again or not." I read her letter. I placed it in a drawer. And then, 6 months later, when the academy opened its application process for staff, Chloe submitted her application. She went through every round of interviews. She was evaluated by Dr. Reyes and 3 other members of the hiring committee. I recused myself entirely from the decision. I did not want influence. I did not want anyone to ever be able to say that Chloe had been hired because she was my sister. 6 weeks later, Dr. Reyes came to my office with her decision. She said, "Hannah, your sister is extremely qualified. Her academic credentials are strong. Her references are excellent. But more importantly, she has something that most candidates don't have. She has lived through it. And she is painfully, brutally honest about her own role in what happened. I want to hire her. I want you to tell me if that is something you can live with." I thought about it for 3 days. And then I told Dr. Reyes yes. Chloe has been working at the Hannah Bennett Academy for 2 years now. I see her sometimes at staff events. We are not close. We are not friends. We may never be. But we nod. We sometimes say a few words. And the children at the academy adore her. She is, apparently, very good at her job. I suspect she works harder than any other counselor because she is still trying to earn something from a person who may never give it to her. Which is fine. That is her journey. Mine is different. My father tried to contact me many times in the first year after the ceremony. Emails, letters, a single phone call that I did not answer. I eventually sent him a short message. I told him that I was not angry at him anymore, but that I needed years of silence before I could imagine a relationship. I told him that if he wanted to earn his way back into my life, he could start by donating anonymously to the academy and by going to therapy. I told him I would check. I told him that if he did those things consistently, for 3 years, I would consider a meeting. Just a meeting. Nothing more. He has been donating, anonymously, through an account my accountant monitors. He has been in therapy, weekly, for 18 months now. Sometimes I wonder what we will talk about if I ever do meet him again. Most days I do not think about it at all. My mother has never reached out. Not once. And that, strangely, is the thing that has finally allowed me to let her go. Because for the first 40 years of my life, part of me was still waiting. Waiting for the apology. Waiting for the explanation. Waiting for the moment she would look at me and see me as her daughter. After she walked out of that ceremony and stayed silent for years, I understood that the waiting was over. She was never going to be that person. She was never going to want to be. And the version of me that had needed her approval was a version of me I had outgrown a long time ago. I just had to give that old version permission to die. So here is what I want to leave you with tonight. If you are watching this, and you have a family like mine, a family that broke you and told you that you were the problem, I want you to listen to me very carefully. You do not owe them access to your life. You do not owe them a reconciliation. You do not owe them your forgiveness on their timeline. You are allowed to build something without them. You are allowed to love people who are not related to you more than you loved the people who shared your blood. You are allowed to rewrite the definition of family in whatever language makes sense to your soul. I rewrote mine. Margaret Whitfield was my mother. My grandmother, who I lost at 14, was my mother. Dr. Reyes is something close to a mother to me now. The academy staff have become my siblings. The children who walk through those doors have become my children in a way that I never thought I could feel. Biology gave me one family. Choice gave me a much larger one, and choice turned out to be stronger. I want to tell you one more thing before I end this story. Last year, on the anniversary of Margaret's death, I drove out to the academy at dawn. I walked through the empty halls. The students were still asleep in their dormitories. The sun was just coming up. I walked to the main entrance, to a small bronze plaque that sits beside the front doors. The plaque reads, "This school was built in memory of Dr. Margaret Whitfield, who stopped her car on a highway in the rain one night and never drove away." I touched the plaque with my fingers. I stood there for a long time, and then I heard a small voice behind me. One of our youngest students, a 12-year-old girl named Priscilla, who had arrived at the academy 6 months earlier after being removed from a home where she had been locked in a basement for most of her childhood. She was standing in the hallway in her pajamas. She asked me quietly, "Miss Hannah, was she your mom?" I turned around. I knelt down to her level. I looked at this little girl who was still learning how to sleep through the night without screaming, and I said, "Yes, sweetheart. She was my mom. And now she is your mom, too. Everyone in this building has her watching over them. You're safe. You're going to be okay. I promise." Priscilla nodded. She reached up and took my hand. We walked to the dining hall together. And I knew, in that moment, that everything my mother had tried to destroy had become something she could never touch. Margaret had won. Margaret always won. And I had carried her across the finish line. My name is Hannah Whitfield. I am 29 years old. I am the founder of the Hannah Bennett Academy, which currently houses 140 students with a waiting list of nearly 1,000. We are building a second campus next year. My mother still does not speak to me. My father is in his 3rd year of therapy. My sister works in the counseling office down the hall from mine. Margaret's blue coat hangs in my office, and I touch it every morning before I begin work. I am not a happy person every single day, but I am a whole person, and I built that wholeness with my own hands from the ashes of a house that was never going to love me. If you are still listening, thank you for staying. If this story touched you in any way, please leave a comment telling me what part meant the most to you. Please like this video. Please subscribe so that other survivors can find this channel. And please, please remember this. The people who threw you away do not get to define you. Only you get to do that. And when you finally pick up the pen and start writing your own story, I promise you, the ink comes out stronger than anything they ever wrote about you. Take care of yourself. I'll see you in the next story.